Hello everybody, my name is Radhika Devasher and I'm a Senior Associate at Sharp Pritchard. I am delighted today to be joined by the two GreenSteves, and this is part of our new series that is being launched. Here we have Steve Gummer, who is a partner at Sharp Pritchard and specialises in projects and infrastructure. And we've also joined by Steve Cirell, who is also a lawyer, but for these purposes is a consultant and will be giving us detail about the consultancy services required in delivering green projects. Right, so hi Steve and Steve, it's lovely to meet with you today. So I believe we're going to talk about a really exciting project that we are working on, or yourselves are working on, entitled GreenSteves, which I think is a great play on words. So, so if you don't know, my name's Radhika, and I'm a Senior Associate at Sharp Pritchard, and I have dabbled in some projects where we're talking more and more about green, how to make contracts more green. So yes, Steve, it'd be lovely to hear your experience of being green.
Well, I've been in this for about 11 or 12 years now. Solicitor, the same as colleagues from Sharp Pritchard, but I decided back in about 2010 that I wanted to be more involved further up the food chain, effectively. And the reason for that was that quite a few times when I was doing the black letter law work on projects, the project had come to me to do that type of work on, and I'd say, "Oh, I wouldn't have set it up this way. This isn't how I'd have structured it." And I kept realising that I could perhaps have a bit more influence by being at the start of the transaction, not doing the facilitation to get it to comply with the law. And as a result of that, I started working more as a consultant. And so my role now really is to sit with the local authority and help them to shape the project, decide what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, to look about how they might procure the help they need to develop business cases, to take it to members, to write reports and so on. So I use my local government experience to help that. And then the transactions that do come down the track and are finally going to get there, and we might touch on that a bit later on, that's where Steve comes in and really makes it happen. But I suppose my point was, it never happens at all unless they get the right guidance at the start. That's really how I got into this.
Oh, that's brilliant.
No, I think that's right. So I mean, my experience tends to be more, as Steve said, at the delivery end. So we're working on a number of environmental projects, particularly in the on the national space. We're working on sort of huge offshore wind and nuclear type projects. On the local level, we're working on district heating schemes and regional generation projects and things like that. So we're kind of immersed across the sector in these things. But I think I've been coming to the same realisation that Steve has for quite a while, hence sort of working together with this, which is it's impossible to separate or entirely separate the delivery from the strategic considerations. And I think ever increasingly our clients have the need for this joined up thinking between the strategic and the legal, and that's kind of the purpose of this GreenSteves idea, is bringing together the strategic and the legal, so that from the earliest stage our clients have got access to this resource to bring together the delivery and the thinking about it, because there's just so much messaging out there. So if we think about what local governments are facing, they're facing net zero targets, they're facing sort of their own external sort of targets, they're facing their own sort of, there's a constant debate about energy security, but actually local authorities have got that just on a local level now. They've got this security challenge of how am I going to get affordable pricing, how are my ratepayers going to get affordable pricing going forward. So they've got their own green agenda, they've got their own security problems, they've got their own pricing problems. And they've just got an infinite array of options of things they could do. Say they've got a blank piece of land, or say they've got unlimited resources. Should I be doing a district heating project? Should I be doing a renewable project? I don't know. But actually they should be sort of thinking about all of the options that are out there, all of the central funding that's out there, and going to someone like Steve and sort of talking about, right, business case time. what's the best option?
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
between us we've got such a combined experience of different projects, we're able to kind of join that thinking together and help people consider the whole thing.
What's changed, I think, is that in the old days, I think energy was just done by the energy manager or the sustainability manager. There you go, off you go, just sort all that out for us. And it wasn't really a strategic option. And what's happened is, since climate change has really developed and gathered momentum, the senior management team and the senior members have started to work out that this actually affects everything that the local authority does. So it doesn't matter whether it's how you run your leisure centre, what happens in your buildings, in school meals, in grounds maintenance, in collecting the bins and sweeping the streets. The climate change has a relevance to everything now. And so now you're getting the senior management and the people who effectively make the decisions in the authorities and who control the purse strings really starting to say, well, okay, let's look at this in a bit more detail. And I think that one of the things we were trying to do here really is to try and generate more awareness of what's happening, of how the energy market's developing, but also to help identify some opportunities. Because in the past, I think those opportunities have been seen by possibly more junior officers like your energy manager, but haven't really got anywhere. Once they get to the senior management team and around the cabinet table, then we really start to see things happening. And that's really what this is about, to try and look at what those opportunities are, to give some practical guidance, help with strategy. Why would you be doing this? And a very simple way of doing that is to look at best practice from around local government and say, here's some really good examples of this authority's done that, these were the benefits they got. Might this fit your authority? Because let's face it, we are a herd really in local government, and it's always worked that way. You've always had trailblazers who've done something and then others tend to follow, and you get the ones right at the front of the leaders, you get the sort of middle pack, and possibly at the end you get ones who don't really get around to doing anything at all. But it's starting to really gather momentum now and start to get somewhere.
Oh, that's brilliant. So that's them really bringing the worlds of consultancy and legal together. So what mediums do you think you'll use for this GreenSteves project?
So the idea, we've picked about sort of 5-6 topics. So our first one's going to be corporate power purchase agreements, i.e. agreements where a local authority effectively enters into an arrangement to secure its energy supply other than from a traditional supplier. So Steve and I have co-written an article. We've tried to take out all the jargon, because even hearing things like PPA or energy supply initially sort of conjures up feelings of woe immediately in most people. We've tried to cut all the jargon out, make it as simple as possible and explain how it's done. And we've sort of both spoken to people and worked with other local authorities and sort of on projects exactly like this and come up with what works, what doesn't, and we've tried to outline that in a really simple sort of guide. So that'll be coming out, and then after that what we'd like to do is facilitate a discussion via a webinar with local authority experts, with some of the people who've been sort of delivering this on the ground. And that's the structure, a series of sort of very accessible pamphlets about how to do a specific thing, whether it's renewable generation or whether it's power purchase agreements, electronic vehicles, and then a webinar following it up each month so that people can discuss it and ideas can be discussed amongst local authorities. And it's again about what the pamphlet's not is a sort of dense legal tome about all of the legal risks. It's this idea of bringing the strategic together with the legal.
Or academic. It's not intended to be an academic analysis that you could research on the internet and write something. It's intended to be rooted. I mean, I quite often use the phrase, down here in the real world where I operate, this is how it happens. Yeah. And I think that I do occasionally work with academics, and they do have a completely different, they are very clever, but they have a completely different view on what's realistic and what can be done and what can't be done. And that's what this is rooted in: a good experience of local government, how local authorities operate, what levers they need to pull to get things done and approved. And it goes without saying, doesn't it? We're talking about all the standard legal tests, the 3 E's, value for money, those written rules that we don't mention specifically too often, but are there in every to make a contract intra vires, we'll touch on those as well.
And just to say then, obviously that's a wide agenda you have. What would be your target audience then? You said local authorities, obviously, but are there any, are we talking about the basics so that anyone can understand these articles, or will there be something slightly more in depth?
Well, I think the interesting thing about climate change is it touches so many different departments, so many different officers, so many different portfolio holders, and so we're intending really not to just cater for the lawyers. The idea is to make it a little bit broader so that others can come into that. And I think it's interesting in many local authorities there are different titles for people who do different things. Some have a certain office. This is the same with strategies, isn't it? Some have a climate change strategy, some call it sustainability strategy, it might be called an energy strategy, it might be called a renewable energy strategy, but it's all broadly the same sort of material. So it's the wide range of officers, but if I think about doing a project, when I'm trying to get consent of officers and members behind a project, say a solar farm or something like that, you want involved in it, you want the obviously you want legal, you want finance, you want the estates if it's to do with land or property, you want planning, you want communications, you want procurement, because these are all people who will have a role to play in that transaction. And what I've tended to find, this is a good example, I think, now come to think of it, of a practical point, is I worked out quite a while ago in my consultancy work that if you get them all together at the start and explain what it's all about, it sets it on the rails nicely, it starts moving. If you don't, you have 10 conversations over the next 12 months with all those different officers as and when they came in. So if your background is more in procurement, of course that wouldn't start for about, you'd be 12 months into a 2-year project, and I'd be explaining to you what we're trying to do. And then what we don't want is you saying, I wouldn't have done it that way then, because that's what we're trying to do here, to work as a team and get it done. So I think that by taking out the jargon, by trying to explain it in a realistic way, in a down-to-earth, real-world way, it will be understandable by a whole range of different officers, and that should set them up nicely if some projects and opportunities are identified.
I think that's right, and that point about bringing different departments together is an experience that we've had as well. So on a project I did recently where I was delivering a very large district heating scheme, the district heating scheme was reliant on a lease, a very long-term lease issued by the estates team. Now, the estates team in local authorities have a totally different way of assessing the value and merits of a lease, and they weren't looking at the energy savings that this was creating for the local authority. They were just saying, oh no, well, this is how I measure the lease. Now, that is right in the day-to-day, but is not the right metric through which to view value through an energy project. So if you combine the sort of initial strategic thinking with those officers, if you bring everyone together at the beginning, then you begin to knock down some of those barriers as opposed to hitting them 6 months into a project.
Yeah. Well, you're getting everyone on the same page, aren't you? That's partly what this. I mean, none of this is rocket science, is it? In any delivering any project, you need a team of people, and hopefully they all realise what we're trying to do here. But I think on the green agenda, it comes back to a number of essentials. And as Steve said, you might get different outcomes coming from a project. You might get different levers and different elements of focus. Now, one of the things in the green side that I think is quite interesting is I always divide it into two. You've got financial benefits and you've got non-financial benefits. And the financial benefits are very straightforward. Are we making a saving? Are we making a surplus or whatever? And you know, everyone understands that. But let's face it, the Director of Finance has to be on board for anything to get off the ground. But it's the non-financial side that's quite interesting, and that's going back to fundamentals like community leadership, leading by example, making your own climate emergency targets and action plan, energy security, and so on. And those things have a value in relation to renewable energy because that's the primary purpose of it, and that goes back to the legal powers as well. I quite often the question is asked, it says, well, hang on a minute, you've said if we build this solar farm, then effectively we'll make a profit, and in local government we're not allowed to make a profit. So yes, but hang on a minute, we're not doing it. The purpose of the contract is not a commercial purpose. The purpose of the contract is to meet your green targets. If you then make a surplus as a consequence of doing that, then you're okay, you see. So everyone has to be on the same page at the start to really make it work.
Good.
So I'm sure you all agree that's been a fascinating discussion to be part of, and please, if you'd like to know more, get in touch. You can do that via LinkedIn or through our GreenGoals page on the Sharp Pritchard website, and there will be monthly articles for you to look forward to. Thank you.